Maybe he just doesn't. Oh, there we go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Enterprise Committee of the Minneapolis City Council. It's October 11th, and I'm here joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Kevin Reich and Councilmember Steve Fletcher. We do have, Councilmember Goodman has a standing obligation with another assignment at the Family Housing Fund. She is there this afternoon, and Councilmember Cano is at home with a sick child. So we won't be able to take a vote on the consent items until Councilmember Warsame runs onto the dais for us. But let me go over some of our agenda items, and then perhaps we could start with the coordinator's update. On the consent agenda, item number 1 is computer-aided dispatch and related mobile support services, our contracts with HCMC, now known as Hennepin Healthcare, the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board, and the University of Minnesota. Item number 2 is for risk management information and claims processing systems with CSC Cybertech. Item number 3 is a contract amendment with Evolve Software for upgrading a Project Docs version. Item number 4 is a Clearwater Analytics contract for investments, capital, and debt management services. Item number 5 is our regular donation of IT equipment to nonprofit organizations. I will move those, and if my colleagues have any discussion or questions, it doesn't appear to be so. I'm going to set that aside and ask the city coordinator to give her update. Welcome, Ms. Rivera-Vandermeiden.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, members of the committee. My name is Nuria Rivera-Vandermeiden. I am the city coordinator and pleased to present an update on all things coordinator lately in our world. Most of that, as you well know, has been focused on the encampment. I continue to be pleased to say that we work with a coalition of partners, that this is not a city-driven project or work, and I shouldn't say project because that minimizes, I believe, the importance of the work that we're moving forward, but I cannot speak highly enough of the members of the county, the state, MUD leadership, and now Red Lake Nation leadership, and other community partners that have really stepped up as we move forward. You will hear more about this in some upcoming meetings. I believe CPED will be presenting next Tuesday at Ways and Means. We also have a meeting slated for the Housing Policy Committee on October 24th, where we hope to present, now that we have had some time to flesh out better plan and implementation and fill in some of the gaps that we did not know earlier. And so I appreciate council giving us some additional time to really get our partners together and figure out what next steps are. I can advance that in terms of the site, that asbestos work continues. Abatement is finishing up this week. The tenant that was there is moving out as of Sunday, and demolition starts next week. The Red Lake Nation has told us that that should probably take approximately 2 weeks, and so that is moving forward. You will hear more about this on Tuesday when CPED provides their update. I'm also really excited to share that we believe we have an operator identified. That has been an unknown question for a lot of people, and the Adult Shelter Collaborative that is comprised of a variety of agencies, including Catholic Charities, Our Savior, St. Stephen's, Salvation Army, and Simpson Housing Services, have stepped up and said we, value the course that the city and our partners, the coalition, is taking in making sure that this is driven by community and the community voices are present. And in acknowledgement of that, have said we would be happy to lend our collective expertise to what we do to manage large shelters, provided that we have buy-in from our community partners, and in particular Red Lake Nation and MUD. Those calls went out and we have gotten wholehearted support, so we are really excited to move that forward. The other bit of news, and it's early yet, but we believe that an anonymous donor has come forward with a significant amount of money in which to help support the operations and the service and delivery needs at the Navigation Center, and even before then at the encampment as we transition to the Navigation Center. And we believe that that may be helpful in doing some additional sort of really targeted outreach to make sure that people reach some good outcomes. So we're looking forward to some of those conversations on October 24th. I will also mention, and I know that I've said this before, that we had been thinking of contracting with somebody who helped design and run the Navigation Center in Seattle, Margaret King. She is, don't tell anyone yet, she is on board. We are getting, hopefully getting some funding from a philanthropic partner, but notwithstanding that, she has been joining us already and providing us with much needed insight and coordination. So we're really excited to have her work with us and unofficially before she starts with us officially. So that has been really great. And then finally, I know that we've received some questions about what services are needed and how are we going to think about what delivery looks like. And I know that I had shared at our last COW meeting about Red Lakes completing a census, and I have at a high level shared some of that information with you. That information is truly being used now to identify what are the actual needs, and frankly has galvanized us to think about priorities. And for us, initial priorities are families, pregnant women, and the elderly as we think about our vulnerable population moving forward. But I'm happy to take a moment there if there are any questions.
Yeah, Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, and thank you for this update and for all of the work that you've been doing on this. I think this has been a really challenging thing for us to take on, and I'm both sort of terrified at the way that we're building the plane while we fly it, and really proud of our city that we're stepping up to make that happen. And so I'm proud of our community for stepping up and for offering all the resources that they have. And I know that that doesn't just happen, that it takes the staff at the city who've been working really hard to coordinate and connect all of that and make all of that work. So I just want to really acknowledge the incredible progress even since the last update, to have an operator identified, to have the partners at the table that we need. I feel so much better with every update as we're getting further along towards really feeling like we have a plan. So thank you for that work, and obviously lots of follow-up conversation to happen, but this is a really, really encouraging update. Thank you.
Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Fletcher, you are not alone in feeling better and relieved, and I think all our partners are feeling the same way, but thank you.
Thank you. I do also want to share, the council president informed us this afternoon that the council action last time to form a work group with council members so that people feel a little bit more involved in it. I know that Councilmember Fletcher is part of that work group, also council members Kano, Warsami, and Ellison, as well as county board representation, that is in progress and that we're in communication with the county board on that. That should be helpful too. Ms. Rivera-Vandermeide, I was curious to see in the census about the current needs of the encampment as surveyed. Could you speak a little bit to how housing preferences were voiced from the people that were surveyed, and maybe some of the other things that perhaps surprised you a little bit in looking at what people's needs are there as identified by them?
Chair Palmisano, thank you for the question, and I'll say that really all for this survey, and we knew some of it initially by some of the work that MUD had done and some of the folks on the ground in the encampment thinking about what those needs were. As Red Lake Nation stepped forward with their site and wanted to really engage and have a pivotal role in thinking about the Navigation Center in the future, they contracted with two folks to really go tent by tent and see and do a preliminary survey of questions, primarily focused on housing needs and health needs, but that's where we really got a good number, at least at the time, of how many people there. Again, at the time of the census, and this happened over a period of 2 days, but every single tent was contacted and asked questions, but 103 tents at that time and 191 individuals. One of the questions were asked about the type of housing they'd accept or be willing to stay in, and we have a variety of responses, and this is something that we will continue to dig in as we move forward. But we heard a lot about, we certainly aren't adverse to shelters, but we really would like a tribal shelter, and that is something that's been a conversation that we hear from the county and our nonprofit partners. That has been a conversation that has happened in the past, but this provides some data about what that looks like. We had, and I know that this council has been involved in conversations about what are we just doing short term for an emergency basis at the Navigation Center. And on day 2, which was the day that they asked these questions, of the 26 people asked on day 2, 26 actually said they preferred FEMA trailers for a variety of reasons. It was felt that it provided better warmth. It was smaller than kind of a sprung congregate unit. There will still be some partitions in trailers, and that actually was just good information to know as we as a city had been looking at trailers mostly because of what we had to deal with the ground and the soil contamination. So it was a surprise to us that that preference would have emerged, and it was something that the Red Lake Nation folks let us know as well. We also heard very clearly that some low barrier housing was critical to success, and in particular low barrier housing that had to do with drug use. And so while it is clear that active use on site will not be allowed in terms of either drug dealing or actually administering drugs, low barrier housing, which is currently happening at shelters across Minneapolis right now, if you come and you are under the influence, you will find a place to be housed, both at the Navigation Center, and I should say that right now at shelters across the city as well. So that type of housing first, low barrier housing model was validated through this survey. The other survey sort of kind of responses that we heard of are the types of services that folks are looking for, both at the encampment, and I think that there's always some, whatever's at the encampment will move to the Navigation Center. And by and large, the request for healthcare, either big tent medical or a mobile clinic or tent-to-tent medical healthcare, was just above 50% across the board as we looked forward to that. Bus cards was surprising at 71% of the respondents saying some form of transportation would be really useful as we moved forward. And the other one that was really interesting was over 50% said a case manager would be really something that we looked at. But there were a variety of responses from therapists to pharmacy to condoms and needles that were part of those things surveyed. And so we are taking that information as we move forward to thinking about the services at the Navigation Center and trying to address the very specific needs at the encampment. For us, and I realize that this requires some extra time built into the system, it was critical to hear from the residents at the encampment to make sure that we weren't designing a navigation center that wasn't responsive to their needs. That would not serve any of us any good.
Yep, that's terrific. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? Okay.
Well, in other news, and Stephen Colbert has a segment called Meanwhile, so I feel like meanwhile in the coordinator's office, there are other things that have been moving forward, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about What Works Cities, with fingers crossed that we expect to be one of the cities selected, or we're hopeful for that. What Works Cities, and I don't know if you recall, is a Bloomberg-funded initiative. It really helps cities use data, not just to quantify, not just to inform, to actually be actionable. And it is something we had an invitation to have them work with us on 2 projects last year. One was about our results programming, and thank you, Chair Palmisano, for all your support in that area. And I think that we're seeing that already, that we're not only using that in different ways and changing the results program, but in fact we are tying it closer to the budget process. And I think that's really exciting. I know for staff to do it, but I'm hopeful that it's useful for council members as well, so that as we think about what resources are being asked from the council body, that we can actually make some questions on, and does your performance, well, how does your performance relate to that? And we're hoping to continue to build in program evaluations to that process as well. The second project that we worked with What Works City was about performance-based contracting, and we used a public works contract for that and a temporary staffing with HR. And there are some recommendations that I expect will come through the council body as well on those. But because of those relationships and how they have seen how much data that the city really relies on, although also really being critical about, do you actually just inform or do you actually use it to make as part of your decision making? We went through a certification process that where 117 cities completed an assessment, 46 completed sort of review calls, and 9 advanced to site visits. I'm proud to say that we are one of those cities that advanced to site visits, and we are hopeful to be selected as one of the cities that will advance to the certification process. And really what it looks at is across the data buckets, including open data, data governance, performance analytics, results-driven contracting, low-cost evaluation, and how do we bench across other cities will really help us be more transparent about what we do, and will help answer some of those questions. Are we spending our dollars wisely? So that's a project that we're excited to move forward as that progresses. So I hope to be able to come to you with final news on that front soon. Last time, or one of the last times we were here, we were talking about the university master contract. We had a little hiccup with that in terms of contracting and finalizing that contract, but I'm very happy to say that not just our team here, Jeff Schneider, but the amazing team at University Relations over at the University of Minnesota have helped us get over whatever barrier was there in contracting, and we are finalizing that and moving forward. Sustainability actually has a project up and ready to go, so we'll be able to move forward with that partnership before the end of the month, I believe. Wanted to also mention with CRO that we have finalized with Rockefeller some questions. They needed to speak with me about how do we move forward with the Chief Resiliency Officer and what are the expectations across the enterprise. We were lucky enough, or I was lucky enough, to speak with Rockefeller just a few weeks ago. They are on board again with and optimistic enough about the work that we're moving forward, that they will be renewing that contract for a 2-year period, including funding. So waiting for that paperwork to move forward so that we can announce who we will move forward with. We had a hiring panel. We have identified preliminarily somebody to fill that position, but we could not do that until we got an okay from Rockefeller, and they have an interest in interviewing that person, and that has happened, and so we'll be able to announce that soon. Wanted to just finally talk about, well, maybe not finally, but talk a little bit about census. NCR has been leading that project, but certainly that project is one that goes across the enterprise. There are a variety of folks, including NCR staff, IGR staff, city clerk staff, communications, IT, CPED, and of course some folks in our internal coordinator office. But wanted to be able to sort of say, as we move forward with that, I know that there are updates about what that looks like. In particular, we know that there are some national challenges to the citizenship question. We know of at least 6 that are moving forward, and so we're actively keeping track of how that moves. We're also looking with creative city making to work with artists to see how we in the city can try to engage our citizens in different ways. And that's a lovely crossover with the program that we've got in place. And in particular, I think highlights the artist-driven initiatives that we really try to employ here as part of arts, culture, and the creative economy. So that work continues to move forward. There are monthly meetings happening internally, and we also participate as part of the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership, which is a statewide network of government, nonprofit, funder, and advocacy groups. And I just want to mention that Council Vice President Jenkins' staff, as COW is the home committee for this work, has been really active as we move forward. But wanted to highlight it because that's an example of one of those large enterprise initiatives that really has all hands on deck, and that has been something that has been occupying some of the folks in our office as well. And then finally, just wanted to mention, this came up today as we continue to think about what emphasis do we put on our neighborhoods and thinking about how else we can continue to leverage Meet Minneapolis's efforts. I was just in a meeting today where we were talking about their tourism master plan and thinking there are some committees that are already looking at wayfinding opportunities. I think the connection to, in particular, I think of arts and placemaking, but a sense of belonging in community, and where that usually happens is in neighborhoods, is really strong. I'm happy to say that we're going to start, I think, with placemaking with Northeast and with our 2 council members here present. And so I think we'll look at that, and I'll also be reaching out to some of our other council members who have particularly brought forward cultural corridors as something to look at as we think about how do we get more tangible about how do we know that we have arrived at this particular neighborhood. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And how do we continue to create a sense of belonging to which our wayfinding efforts will be driving people to? So hoping to create that experiential sort of package for those who visit, but also a very clear sense of belonging for those who have pride in their neighborhoods. With that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. We do have a question or comment from Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I just want to thank you for leading on this sort of question about connecting tourism to neighborhoods. It feels like such a missed opportunity when people come to our beautiful city and they only hang out right around the convention center and they don't find their way to our river or to our lakes and to our great small businesses. And certainly in my short time so far on the board on Meet Minneapolis, I've been trying to push them in that direction, and I appreciate your leadership to sort of continue with that push in terms of really aligning the work that they do with the city's goals. It's just really, really important. So thanks so much for that, for supporting arts and small businesses in the ways that we think about our tourism plan going forward.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, with that, first let me move to receive and file this update on activities from the city coordinator, and to say personally, thank you so much for all of the extra time, energy, and effort that you and so many other staff people have been putting into the encampment work. It's a lot, and we know that. So to receive and file the coordinator's activities, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That carries. And then the consent agenda items that were listed earlier, I'd like to move all of those items for approval. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. With that, our meeting is adjourned, and we will see people next time. Thanks.